The threats started small, notes slid under her office door, and signed emails with vague warnings, social media DMs that vanished before she could show them to anyone. At first, Margaret Whitmore laughed. Not in amusement, but in the sort of cynical, weary exhale only a woman who'd been in business long enough to know better could manage. People envied power. They envied women who wielded it unapologetically. And Maggie had built her empire exactly like that, on sharp instincts, relentless discipline, and a heart she locked behind deadlines and six-figure contracts. But when her car was keyed outside the Gallo at the Met, and her townhouse's security cameras caught a figure lingering too long outside her gate in the middle of the night, she could no longer pretend it was nothing. Just hire a bodyguard, her assistant, Devon, had said. For the holidays. For peace of mind. Peace of mind. As if such a thing existed in Maggie's world. Still, it was easier to agree than argue. She told Devon to handle it, didn't ask questions. Which is how she ended up standing in the marble foyer of her Manhattan townhouse at 7 a.m., 3 days before her company's Christmas fundraiser, face-to-face with someone who looked like she belonged on the cover of a military-themed fashion magazine, rather than guarding a woman 15 years her senior. "Ms. Whitmore?" the girl no woman said, voice low and precise, like someone who didn't waste time on fluff. "I'm Jordan Hayes. I believe you were expecting me." Maggie blinked. Jordan couldn't have been more than 25, though her dark eyes held a gravity that belied her age. She was dressed in civilian clothes, black jeans, fitted jacket, hair tied back in a no-nonsense braid, but she stood with the posture of someone who'd been trained to assess threats before they entered a room. Maggie, still in her silk robe and barefoot on the heated floors, felt suddenly exposed. "I was expecting someone older," she said before she could stop herself. Jordan's mouth curved, not quite a smile. "Most people do." She extended her hand, firm and confident. Maggie hesitated, then shook it. The contact sent a jolt up her spine she immediately ignored. This was work. This was protection. Nothing more. "Your assistant sent over the threat details," Jordan said, already scanning the space with subtle efficiency. "I'd like to do a perimeter check before we talk logistics, if that's all right." "Of course," Maggie said, gesturing vaguely. "Be my guest." She watched Jordan disappear into the hall, her steps silent despite the hardwood floors. Maggie ran a hand through her hair. This was temporary. 2 weeks, tops. She just had to survive the holidays with a young, unnervingly attractive shadow trailing her every move. Easy. Except it wasn't, because Jordan was more than just efficient. She was perceptive. The kind of person who didn't just see things, she noticed. By that evening, she'd already suggested improvements to the house's security system, changed Maggie's schedule to limit exposure, and found a blind spot in the back garden Maggie hadn't even known existed. She didn't smile often, but when she did, it was quick and devastating. Maggie found herself lingering in rooms she didn't need to be in just to watch her work. On the second day, Jordan caught her staring. "You okay, ma'am?" "That damned ma'am." "Yes," Maggie said, too quickly. "Just tired." "I can adjust your evening routine if you'd like," Jordan offered. "Add another buffer between events." "You've been overextending." "I'm not overextended." Jordan tilted her head, unreadable. "Sure." Maggie turned on her heel before she could say something foolish. Or ask how Jordan had figured out in 48 hours what her closest friends hadn't managed in 10 years. That night, she couldn't sleep. She told herself it was because of the threats. The security. The mounting pressure of the fundraiser. It wasn't. It was the memory of Jordan's hand briefly on her lower back as she guided her into the car. The brush of her arm when they passed in the hallway. The way her gaze lingered sometimes, like she saw right through Maggie's carefully curated armor. She was too young. It was inappropriate. Dangerous. And Maggie hadn't felt this alive in years. It started with a click. Faint, barely audible. Maggie was seated in her home office, going over the schedule for the charity gala, her reading glasses perched low on her nose, a glass of untouched wine by her hand. The clock had just crossed midnight. She wasn't expecting sleep. Not lately. The click came again, this time louder, sharper. It didn't belong. Not to the usual settling sounds of her old townhouse, nor to the whir of the HVAC or the distant traffic outside. Her eyes flicked toward the window. The streetlights bled amber across the frosted glass, but nothing moved. Still, the hairs on the back of her neck rose. She reached for the panic button Jordan had insisted she keep within arm's reach and pressed it. Not even 20 seconds later, Jordan burst into the room. No knock. No hesitation. Just boots on wood, a blur of black moving with lethal grace. What happened? Jordan asked, gun drawn, her eyes already scanning. There was a noise. Near the back window. It sounded like, "Stay here." Jordan didn't wait for confirmation. She vanished into the dark corridor, steps impossibly quiet. Maggie stood, pulse hammering in her throat. She hated this feeling, being vulnerable, being watched, not being in control. But more than that, she hated the knowledge that without Jordan, she would have dismissed the sound as nothing. And maybe it was nothing. But something about the way Jordan moved, the tension in her shoulders, the precise way she cleared each room, told Maggie that it didn't feel like nothing to her. 10 minutes passed. 15. Maggie paced. The house felt cavernous. Too large. Too empty. She kept her hand wrapped tightly around the stem of her wine glass, as if it might anchor her. Finally, Jordan returned. I checked the whole perimeter. No sign of forced entry, but there's a boot print in the snow by the garden door. Fresh. Maggie's chest tightened. You're sure it's not the groundskeeper? He doesn't come this late. And the print's deep. Heavy. Whoever it was, they lingered. Maggie swallowed hard. What now? I'll review the camera feeds. But I want you to stay downstairs tonight. The second floor has too many blind spots. I'll secure the library, fireplace, no windows behind you, heavy doors. It's the safest room until I can verify everything. You want me to sleep in the library? Not sleep. Just wait. You won't be alone. Maggie raised a brow. You're staying with me. It wasn't a question. Jordan nodded. Until I'm sure it's clear. Maggie wanted to argue. Wanted to maintain some illusion of independence, of not needing to be protected. But the truth was, she didn't want to be alone either. Not tonight. 10 minutes later, they were both in the library. Jordan had moved a thick armchair close to the hearth, built a fire with swift, practiced hands, and positioned herself by the doorway, vigilant, silent. Maggie sat across from her, watching the flames dance. The flickering light softened the angles of the room, the dark wood, the shelves filled with titles she barely had time to touch anymore. It also softened Jordan's features, casting her in gold and shadow. Maggie sipped her wine. Do you always sleep in doorways? Only when I care about what's behind them. Maggie looked up sharply. Jordan's tone hadn't shifted. It was calm, matter of fact, but something about the words made the air heavier between them. You don't seem rattled, Maggie said. Someone may have tried to break in. Not the first time I've dealt with stalkers or threats. Is that meant to comfort me? Jordan shrugged. It's meant to tell you I'm trained for this. You're safe with me. Maggie let the silence stretch. You talk like someone twice your age. I was forced to grow up fast. Maggie tilted her head, studying her. What happened to you, Jordan? Jordan's eyes flickered to the fire, then back to her. You don't really want to know. Try me. Another beat of silence. Then Jordan spoke, quiet and even. I joined the military at 18 to get out of a home that didn't want me. My father said no one would ever take a queer girl seriously, least of all in combat. I spent 4 years proving him wrong. Saw things I can't unsee. Came back older, angrier, better trained, but not better healed. That took longer. Still does. Maggie's throat tightened. She hadn't expected an answer, let alone one so raw. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. It brought me here. To guarding middle-aged editors during the holidays? Jordan smiled, faint and crooked. To people who don't deserve to feel afraid in their own homes. Maggie's breath caught. The fire cracked. Outside, the wind picked up, brushing snowflakes against the stained glass windows. She set her wine down and leaned back into the chair. Do I seem afraid to you? Jordan's gaze held hers. You seem tired of pretending you're not. Maggie should have looked away. Should have deflected with a quip, a smirk, the kind of self-deprecating armor she always used. But she didn't. Something about the honesty in Jordan's eyes unmoored her. I've spent my entire adult life making people believe I'm unshakable, Maggie said slowly. And it worked. Until lately. Until the threats. Until you. Jordan's brows lifted slightly. Me? You see through me. I don't like it. I don't think that's true. No. Jordan stood then, crossed the small space between them. She didn't touch Maggie, just crouched beside the chair, looking up at her, the firelight making her eyes impossibly deep. I think part of you's been waiting for someone to see through it all. To not buy the act. To ask what's underneath. And what do you think is underneath? Maggie asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Jordan's answer was immediate. A brilliant woman who's lonelier than she wants to admit. Maggie's breath hitched. Her fingers twitched against the armrest, dangerously close to Jordan's. The moment hung, fragile, combustible. Then Maggie leaned back, breaking it. You're good at this, she said, voice sharper than she intended. Getting people to open up. That's part of your training, too. Jordan didn't flinch. No. That part's just me. Silence. Long and loaded. The fire popped. Finally, Jordan rose. Get some rest, Ms. Whitmore. I'll keep watch. She returned to the doorway, eyes forward, stance alert. But Maggie could feel her presence now, like a gravitational pull across the room. She closed her eyes, but sleep didn't come for a long, long time. The morning after the incident, Maggie awoke to the faint scent of cedar smoke still lingering in her clothes. She'd slept restlessly on the leather couch in the library, wrapped in a thick cashmere blanket Jordan had draped over her sometime during the night. When she stirred, Jordan was already gone, presumably checking the grounds again or combing through security footage. It wasn't even 6 a.m., and yet the city beyond the frosted windows had begun its relentless churn. But inside, the townhouse still held the breathless quiet of a night that hadn't quite released its grip. Maggie sat up slowly, her neck stiff, her thoughts even more so. Last night had cracked something open in her. She wasn't sure if it was Jordan's quiet intensity, the way she listened without trying to fix, or the unbearable tenderness of being seen so completely. But it unsettled her. And Maggie Whitmore hated being unsettled. She was halfway through her first coffee when Jordan returned, fresh from the cold, cheeks flushed and eyes sharper than the winter wind. Good morning, Jordan said simply, as if they hadn't peeled each other open like pages of an unfinished novel in front of the fire. Perimeter's clear. No new prints. No tampering with the cameras. Whoever it was last night didn't come back. Maggie nodded, careful not to meet her eyes for too long. That's good. I still want extra coverage during today's event. The charity brunch is public. High exposure. You'll be with me the entire time. Isn't that enough? Jordan walked further into the room, her movements measured but intense, as always. Not if whoever's behind this is getting bolder. They're testing boundaries. Starting with your home. Next might be your reputation. Or something worse. Maggie let out a sigh, bracing her palms against the countertop. This was supposed to be the calm part of the year. December used to mean lights and music and writing bonus checks. Now I'm waiting for something to explode. It won't, Jordan said firmly. Not while I'm around. Love what you've seen so far and want to help me keep creating these awesome stories on this channel? Then subscribe and hit the bell. Your subscription supports the channel and makes sure you get more exciting stories. Something about the way she said it, low, certain, almost fierce, sent a shiver down Maggie's spine. Not fear. Anticipation. Later that afternoon, the ballroom at the St. Regis buzzed with quiet elegance. Crystal chandeliers caught the pale light filtering through tall windows. Waiters moved like ghosts, carrying trays of champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Maggie moved among the crowd in a deep forest green suit, her posture effortlessly poised, every word calculated. She was in her element. Almost. Jordan, dressed in a sleek black ensemble that was barely distinguishable from the venue's private security, stayed close, too close, and Maggie was acutely aware of it. Of her presence. Her eyes. Her breath on the back of her neck when she leaned in to whisper. Two men near the far wall. One's been watching you since you entered. I'll intercept. How do you know he's not just admiring my impeccable tailoring? Maggie murmured, a teasing smile brushing her lips. Jordan didn't take the bait. He doesn't blink when you move. That's not admiration. That's calculation. Maggie's smile faltered. Jordan moved away without waiting for permission, gliding through the crowd like a storm on silent feet. Maggie watched her go, heart kicking harder in her chest. Within minutes, Jordan returned, her face unreadable. Just a blogger looking for scandal. Said he had a tip you were secretly dating a female senator. He was hoping for a quote. I deleted the photos he tried to take. You deleted his photos? He handed over the phone voluntarily after I explained his options. Maggie blinked. Remind me never to piss you off. Jordan's expression softened slightly. Noted. For the next hour, Maggie tried to focus on the event. She gave a short speech, shook hands, smiled at cameras. But her awareness of Jordan didn't dim. When she shifted, Maggie felt it. When she scanned the room, Maggie followed her gaze. And when she stepped too close while guiding Maggie past a dense cluster of guests, her hand brushing the small of her back, Maggie nearly forgot how to breathe. They ended up in the hotel's side corridor, dimly lit, blessedly empty, after the last photo op. Maggie leaned against the cool marble wall, exhaling sharply. This is getting out of hand. The threat. You. Jordan froze. Me? Yes, Maggie said, her voice low and trembling. You walk like the room belongs to you. You look at me like you see things no one's supposed to. And every time you touch me, even by accident, I feel like the floor's gone. Jordan took a careful step closer. Then stop pretending you don't want it. Maggie swallowed hard. You're half my age. 21 years and some months. I counted. That's not a reason. No. It's an excuse. Another step. The air between them thickened, pulsed. Maggie's voice broke. This can't happen. Then tell me to back off. I can't. Jordan's voice dropped to a whisper. Then don't lie to yourself. She reached out, brushing a strand of hair from Maggie's cheek. It wasn't a kiss. It wasn't even a confession. But it was the closest thing to surrender either of them had dared so far. Then Jordan's phone buzzed. She stepped back, immediately alert. Security just flagged something. A note was found in your car. Maggie went cold. What did it say? Just 3 words. I see you. The storm rolled in faster than expected. By the time they returned from the event, the sky had already gone gunmetal gray and the first heavy flakes began to fall, coating the city in a silence that felt more like suspense than peace. Jordan had been on edge ever since the note. She hadn't said much on the ride home, but Maggie could feel the change in her. Her shoulders tighter, her eyes scanning more sharply, her hands flexing subtly against her thighs. Maggie sat in the back seat pretending to check her phone, but really, she was watching Jordan's reflection in the tinted window, her jaw locked, her mouth set in that infuriatingly calm way that never cracked, not even under pressure. By the time they pulled into the private garage of Maggie's townhouse, the wind had picked up and snow was swirling like ash in a blizzard. Jordan ordered the driver to leave immediately and secure the vehicle elsewhere. I don't want any cars sitting too long. If someone's watching the property, anything idle draws attention. Maggie nodded, too exhausted to argue, but inside her chest something buzzed, equal parts dread and adrenaline. Inside, the house was warm, the lights already dimmed by the evening settings Jordan had programmed into the system. She moved ahead of Maggie, checking every entry point, her body all muscle and precision. Maggie removed her coat slowly, watching her from behind, and told herself for the 100th time that the pull she felt had to be some kind of delusion, stress, adrenaline, something else entirely. But when Jordan turned and caught her looking, neither of them looked away. There's more snow coming, Jordan said. A lot. They're shutting down several city streets, and airports are grounding flights. So we're stuck in here. For at least the next 24 hours, yes. Maggie raised an eyebrow. You sound like you're delivering a prison sentence. Just making sure you're prepared. Maggie moved past her, brushing close enough that their coats nearly touched, and she didn't miss the way Jordan's eyes followed her. I've endured longer winters, she said, walking toward the living room. But I admit this one is unusually well-armed. Jordan didn't smile, but her voice dipped, unmistakably warm. Good. I plan to be. Hours passed. The snow piled high against the windows, muting the world outside. Maggie tried to focus on her work, but her mind wandered. To the note. To the strange way she felt more vulnerable in her own home than anywhere else. But most of all, to Jordan. Jordan, who moved like a storm held back by sheer will. Jordan, who watched everything and yet gave nothing away. Jordan, who had made her feel something under that mistletoe-like tension since the first moment she'd stepped through the door. After dinner, silent, cautious, unbearably charged, they found themselves in the den, the only room Maggie hadn't designed for company. It was smaller, cozier, filled with personal things. A faded photo of her parents on the shelf. A stack of worn books by the fireplace. The scent of old paper and wood polish lingering in the air. Maggie curled into the corner of the long leather couch, blanket over her legs, a glass of scotch balanced in one hand. Jordan stood nearby, arms crossed, silent. You don't sit much, do you? Maggie asked, her voice softer than usual. Sitting is slower to react, Jordan replied. You don't relax much either. Not when I'm on duty. And when you're off duty? That made Jordan pause. For the first time, she looked genuinely unsure. It's been a long time since I've been off duty. Maggie tilted her head. You're safe here. You could sit. Just for a minute. Jordan hesitated, then finally moved closer, choosing the opposite end of the couch. She didn't lean back. She didn't sprawl. She perched like someone still ready to bolt at any moment. But she was closer now. And in the quiet, with only the sound of the wind and the occasional snap from the fire, something shifted. You really think this person is dangerous? Maggie asked after a long silence. I think they're escalating. I don't like the timing. The gala's in 4 days. Exactly. The more public your schedule gets, the more they'll know how to move around it. Maggie sipped her drink. You always think 10 steps ahead? I was trained to. That must be exhausting. Jordan glanced at her. It's lonelier than exhausting. Maggie wasn't prepared for that answer. Her heart twisted, sharp and sudden. You keep saying things like that, she murmured. Like you're trying to get under my skin. I'm not trying, Jordan said quietly. You're already under it. Maggie froze. Jordan shifted slightly, turning toward her, and the blanket between them rustled like something sacred. I should go back to patrol, Jordan said, but didn't move. Maggie's voice cracked. Or you could stay. Just a little longer. The silence that followed was thick and breathing. Jordan didn't move away. She leaned back slowly, resting against the cushion, her body now fully facing Maggie. Their legs weren't touching, but they might as well have been. Maggie set her glass down with a soft clink and met Jordan's gaze. You have this way of making me forget how old I am. You say that like it's a bad thing. It is. Or it should be. You're not a child. Not intimidated. Not confused. You're 24. And you're radiant. That word. Maggie exhaled, shaky and uneven. Jordan's hand moved, just slightly, and her fingers brushed Maggie's over the edge of the blanket. Maggie didn't pull away. She couldn't. I don't do this, she whispered. Not with employees. Not with anyone, really. You don't do what? Feel this much. Want this much. Jordan's eyes searched hers. Then maybe it's time you did. The words landed like thunder. Maggie's breath hitched as Jordan's hand slid fully into hers now, warm and certain. The storm outside screamed against the windows, but inside, the world had gone very still. Maggie leaned forward slightly, her lips parting, and Jordan mirrored the motion. The distance closed. Not fast. Not desperate. But inevitable. The kiss didn't happen. Not yet. But it hovered there, inches away.
Charged.
Waiting. Maggie's voice came like a breath. We're not ready. Jordan's whisper curled against her skin. Then let me protect you until you are. By morning, the storm had passed, but the cold remained, settling over the house like a second skin. Maggie woke early, earlier than usual, her head foggy, her body still echoing with the memory of warmth beside her that never quite touched her. The night before had left something open between her and Jordan, something fragile and electric and dangerously unspoken. They hadn't kissed, but they had hovered on the edge of it, breaths mingling, hearts unguarded, and Maggie hadn't known whether to run or fall into it. She'd chosen neither. She'd pulled back with an excuse about needing space, retreated to her bedroom without another word, left Jordan standing alone in the firelight with a kind of restraint that felt like punishment. Now, hours later, that choice felt like a mistake. But Maggie was used to mistakes, used to carrying them in silence, wrapping them in logic until they became acceptable regrets. She moved through her morning routine mechanically. Shower, hair twisted into a sleek chignon, makeup precise, outfit severe and sharp. Her reflection didn't betray her, but inside, she was restless. She found Jordan already in the kitchen, leaning against the counter with a tablet in one hand and coffee in the other. She looked unaffected. Or maybe just practiced at pretending, the same way Maggie was. Morning, Jordan said without looking up. Perimeter's clear. I'm reviewing satellite imaging. I want to cross-check against last night's movement around the property. Maggie poured herself coffee in silence, the air between them taut. You didn't sleep. Didn't need to. You'll burn out at this rate. Jordan finally looked up, meeting her eyes with that calm, steady gaze that made Maggie feel both exposed and seen. Not while you're still a target. Maggie looked away, fingers tightening around the mug. She hated how that word, target, landed in her chest like guilt. About last night, Jordan didn't flinch. You don't owe me anything. I didn't say I did. Then don't treat me like I crossed a line. Maggie's mouth set into a hard line. You didn't cross anything. I did. I let it get too personal. It already is personal, Jordan said quietly. The moment someone threatened your life, it became personal. And don't pretend we're just playing roles here.
You feel it.
I know you do. You're 24, Maggie said sharply, and the words came out like a weapon. I'm 45. That's not a gap, it's a canyon. Jordan set the tablet down, her expression unreadable. So, what are you afraid of? That I'll make you feel something? Or that you already do? I'm afraid of what people will say. What they'll think. I've spent my whole life building something with credibility, control, respect. And now you want something that doesn't fit into that perfect box. Maggie swallowed hard, throat dry. You make it sound so simple. It is simple, Jordan said, stepping closer, her voice low. You want me. I want you. The world will always talk. Let it. But Maggie took a step back. Not because she wanted to, but because her fear still held her tighter than any desire could. You don't understand what it's like to be a woman at my age in this position. Everything I do is scrutinized.
Judged.
Laughed at if I'm too cold. Dismissed if I'm too warm. A woman half your age gets admired for confidence. A woman my age gets called a bitch for the same thing. I've worked too damn hard to be taken seriously, and I won't throw it away for a crush. This isn't a crush. Then it's worse, Maggie snapped, voice cracking. Because I can't afford to feel this way. Not about you. Not now. The silence that followed felt deafening. Jordan didn't move. Didn't argue. Just stood there, breathing slow, shoulders tense. Understood, she said finally, voice clipped. Then she turned and walked out. Maggie didn't stop her. She stood in the kitchen alone, heart pounding, regret already sinking into her bones. It was better this way. Cleaner. Safer. Except it wasn't. Because less than 3 hours later, Maggie heard Jordan shouting her name. She was in the upstairs study, sorting through donation reports for the gala, when Jordan's voice cut through the quiet like a blade. Maggie dropped the folder, heart leaping, and rushed downstairs to find Jordan standing by the glass doors leading to the back garden. Her hand was clenched, jaw tight. "Look," she said. Maggie followed her gaze. The snow outside had been disturbed. Not by footsteps. By something else. A drone. Small, black, unmoving now, nestled in the middle of the pristine snow. It had dropped a small object just feet from the door. Maggie opened it with trembling fingers, a note folded tightly, sealed with clear tape. 3 words again. "She's not safe." Maggie's stomach dropped. "When did it happen?" 10 minutes ago. I just saw it on the camera feed. It came low and fast, barely tripped the sensors. I was scanning the front perimeter. They timed it perfectly. They got into our airspace? They got close enough to send a message, Jordan said, voice dark. And this one wasn't for you. It was for me. Maggie turned sharply. What? She's not safe.
They're talking about you.
They're watching me, seeing how close I've gotten. This isn't just about threatening your life. It's about using you to get to me. Maggie felt the room tilt. But why? Why you? Jordan hesitated. There are people from my past. Enemies I made in service. People who don't forget. And now, I've made myself visible. Attached myself to someone high profile. That makes you vulnerable. You should leave, Maggie said instantly, panic spiking. If this is about you, then you're putting me at risk. I'm not going anywhere, Jordan said, stepping closer, voice trembling now with something raw. Do you hear me? I chose this job. I chose you. And if someone's trying to scare me into running, they're going to be very disappointed. But if you stay and they come for me, then I'll stop them, Jordan snapped. With every breath I have. I would die before I let anything happen to you. The words dropped between them like a thunderclap. Maggie stared at her, throat thick. Don't say things like that.
Why?
Because it's easier if I keep it impersonal. Jordan took one step closer. I'm not going to pretend anymore, Maggie. Not after last night. Not after this. You don't get to say you'd die for me, Maggie whispered, when I'm still trying to convince myself I'm allowed to want you. Then stop convincing yourself otherwise. The air between them snapped tight. Maggie turned, walking away before she could do something reckless. But Jordan didn't follow. Didn't press. She just stood there, still as stone, as Maggie fled into the depths of the house with her heart on fire and her walls starting to collapse. The snow didn't melt, but the air shifted. The storm had passed 2 days ago, leaving the city washed in white and silence, but inside Maggie's townhouse, the tension hadn't moved, hadn't softened, hadn't broken. If anything, it had thickened, weaving itself into every room, every corridor, every glance exchanged in the narrow spaces between obligation and denial. Maggie hadn't spoken about the drone since the morning it happened. Jordan had quadrupled the security. New cameras, new sensors, a private patrol hired discreetly to circle the block every hour, and yet none of it made Maggie feel safer. Because the danger wasn't just outside anymore, it was inside her, clawing up her throat every time Jordan entered a room. The timing couldn't have been worse. In 2 days, it would be Christmas Eve. The gala loomed like a spotlight waiting to expose every inch of her life, her reputation, her secrets. And now her feelings. You need to make a statement, Devin had said on the phone that morning. Let people see that the threats aren't affecting your poise. Show up to the charity auction tonight. Smile.
Speak.
Wear red. Maggie stared at the closet for nearly an hour before choosing anything. She settled on a crimson velvet dress, high neckline, long sleeves, elegant but sharp. Controlled. But no matter how much power the dress projected, she still felt raw underneath. And Jordan made that worse. Or maybe more honest. She didn't say much all day. She moved like shadow and steel, eyes always scanning, fingers always ready. But Maggie noticed the things that didn't fit into her usual rhythm. The way she didn't finish her coffee. The way her gaze lingered when she thought Maggie wasn't looking. The way her voice lowered only when speaking to her, as if her whole body recognized the shift in energy and refused to play it cool. The car ride to the auction was too quiet. Maggie sat stiffly, hands clasped in her lap, while Jordan sat beside her instead of up front, one hand resting near her thigh, but never touching. Outside, the city twinkled with too many lights. Inside, Maggie's chest felt like it might crack open. "They haven't made another move," Jordan said finally, breaking the silence. "But that doesn't mean they've stopped watching." "So we smile for the cameras," Maggie murmured, "and wait for them to blink first." "We don't wait. We prepare." Maggie looked at her then, really looked, and for a moment her defenses threatened to collapse again. Jordan looked devastating in black, tailored suit, simple lines, eyes like thunder under two calm skies. She was 24, yes. But she looked like she carried centuries inside her. The auction was held in a glass-walled gallery, overlooking the park. It was tasteful, exclusive, filled with power players and philanthropic darlings who smiled like they weren't always calculating. Maggie moved among them with the same poise she'd worn for decades, lips curled into the perfect polite expression, words elegant and forgettable. Jordan stayed close, always one step behind. Never intrusive, but always there. And that was the problem, because she was there. And every time Maggie brushed past her shoulder, every time she turned and found Jordan's gaze already on her, something inside her unraveled a little more. It happened near the wine table. A donor Maggie barely knew, a venture capitalist with a practiced grin, touched her elbow and leaned in too close, laughing at something she hadn't said. Jordan appeared out of nowhere. "Excuse me," she said, voice low but cutting. "We need to review the schedule, Ms. Whitmore." Maggie blinked, startled, but nodded. The man opened his mouth to protest, but Jordan was already guiding her away, hand grazing her lower back just long enough to send fire through her spine. They stepped into a quieter corner near the balcony doors. Outside, snow still clung to the edges of the stone railings, the night sharp and clean. Inside, Maggie's heart pounded. "That was unnecessary," she said, voice tight. "He was harmless. He was handsy. You're not my jealous girlfriend." "No," Jordan said, eyes burning. "But he's not your anything either." Maggie stared at her, the space between them suddenly too charged to pretend. "You said we were being watched." "We are." "Then stop touching me like you want me." Jordan stepped closer. "You think I can help it? You have to."
Why?
Because of your pride? Or because you're scared of what happens when you stop pretending you don't feel the same? Maggie opened her mouth, but no sound came out. Jordan exhaled, slow and furious. "You keep saying I'm too young, that I don't understand your world. But you know what I see when I look at you? A woman who built something out of nothing. A woman who commands rooms without raising her voice. A woman who's so goddamn afraid to be wanted, she'd rather be alone than risk being seen." Maggie's hands were shaking. She didn't know if it was anger or something closer to surrender. "You think this is easy for me?" she whispered. "You think I don't lie awake at night wondering what people will say? That they'll call me pathetic, desperate, clinging to something I shouldn't have? Let them," Jordan said fiercely. "Let them talk. Let them rot. You know what I see when I look at you, Maggie? The most desired woman I've ever met. The most impossible, infuriating, brilliant woman I've ever wanted. And I'm so damn tired of pretending I don't." Maggie's breath hitched. The crowd was behind them, the gala in full swing. And still, the world narrowed to the space between their mouths. Jordan didn't kiss her, but she leaned in close enough that Maggie could feel her breath, smell the warmth of her skin, hear the trembling restraint in her silence. "Christmas Eve is in 2 days," Jordan said softly. "And I'm staying until then, no matter how hard you push." "What happens on Christmas Eve?" Maggie asked, even though she already knew. "You already know," Jordan replied. "You just haven't decided whether you'll let it happen." Then she stepped back, and Maggie had to close her eyes just to keep from chasing her. The house had never felt quieter. Outside, the city was folding itself into the lull of Christmas Eve, Streets emptying, shop windows glowing, snow falling in lazy spirals against a velvet sky. But inside Maggie's townhouse, time moved differently.
Slower.
Heavier. As if the walls themselves were waiting for something to happen. Maggie stood barefoot in the hallway, wrapped in a navy silk robe, holding a half-finished glass of wine. The clocks had passed 10, but she hadn't gone to bed.
Couldn't.
Sleep felt impossible, irrelevant, when every corner of her mind was full of Jordan. Not just her voice or her hands, or the way she moved with silent precision, but the way she looked at Maggie. As if she wasn't someone older, or broken, or past her moment.
As if she were still worth seeing.
Maggie had avoided her all day. Not with cruelty, but with distance. She'd gone through the motions, gift deliveries, charity calls, a video message to the staff, but each task felt like it was buffering something she couldn't put off much longer. And now, the buffer was gone. She walked slowly through the dim corridor, past the ornate garlands and faint twinkle of holiday lights, until she reached the library. The fire was lit. Of course it was. Jordan was there, seated on the rug in front of the hearth, sleeves rolled up, fingers curled around a mug of coffee. Her hair was down for the first time in days, soft, dark waves falling just past her shoulders. It was such a simple, human detail, and yet it nearly undid Maggie. She stood in the doorway without speaking. Jordan looked up and met her gaze without surprise. "Can't sleep?" she asked, voice low. Maggie shook her head. "Neither can I," Jordan said, patting the space beside her. "Come sit." Maggie hesitated. The robe clung to her like truth, and she hated how vulnerable she felt in it. But Jordan didn't look at her body. She looked at her face. Her eyes. As if nothing else mattered. So Maggie crossed the room, slowly, deliberately, and sat beside her. The fire crackled. The snow whispered against the windows. "You always seem so calm," Maggie murmured after a moment. "I used to fake it. Now I just live in it. Even when everything feels unstable, out of control." Jordan's voice softened. "I spent years living in chaos. There's something comforting about it now. Like I know where I stand when nothing else is certain." Maggie turned to her. "And where do you stand with me?" Jordan's gaze held hers. "Right here. Until you tell me not to." Maggie swallowed hard. "I should have told you days ago. About how I feel. About what I want. But every time I get close, I hear this voice in my head, telling me it's foolish. That I'm too old. That it's inappropriate. That I'm embarrassing myself. Then you need to start listening to a different voice. Like yours? Like the one inside you that wants to live again." Maggie closed her eyes. "I don't know how." Jordan reached out slowly, fingers brushing Maggie's hand. "Then let me show you." They sat there, fingers barely touching, until Maggie leaned her head back against the couch and whispered, "There's a sprig of mistletoe above the archway." Jordan looked toward the doorway, then back at her. "That an invitation? It's a warning." "For who?"
"Me."
Jordan shifted closer. "Then maybe it's time to stop running." Maggie turned her face slowly toward hers. The world outside disappeared. The years. The fear. The rules she'd lived by. None of it mattered. Not here. Not with her. Their lips touched. Softly. No rush, no desperation. Just heat and honesty, and the kind of ache that came from too much restraint. Maggie's hand moved to Jordan's neck, fingers curling there, and Jordan deepened the kiss just slightly, enough to make Maggie tremble. It wasn't fireworks. It was fire. Slow, growing, consuming. When they broke apart, foreheads resting together, breaths shared in the silence, Maggie whispered, "What happens now?" Jordan smiled against her lips. "Now you stop pretending you don't want me. And I stop pretending I can keep my distance." Maggie opened her eyes. "This changes everything." "Good," Jordan said. "Because everything needed to change. It should have felt like peace." The morning after the kiss, the house was quiet, touched by the faint gold of winter sunlight filtering through frost-covered windows. The fire had burned low overnight, casting sleepy shadows across the walls, and the scent of pine and cinnamon from the garlands lingered in the air. Maggie lay awake in her bed, fully dressed but motionless, one hand resting near her mouth as if she could still feel the imprint of Jordan's lips. The night before replayed in slow, electric loops. The kiss, the warmth, the terrifying relief of letting go, and the fear that followed. That, especially, wouldn't leave. Jordan had gone back to her room after the kiss, after one long, devastating look that said both "I want to stay" and "I'll give you space, if that's what you need." Maggie had wanted her to stay.
God, she had.
But she'd nodded silently toward the stairs instead, choosing restraint over impulse, choosing caution over the screaming want in her chest. Now, hours later, regret clawed at her throat. Not because of the kiss, but because of what it meant. It wasn't a moment she could bury. Not this time. Not with Jordan. She heard footsteps downstairs, Jordan's, unmistakable, measured.
Steady.
Maggie stood slowly, smoothing her blouse with trembling fingers, and made her way down. She found Jordan in the kitchen, hair pulled back, sleeves pushed up, one hand wrapped around a mug of black coffee, the other resting lightly on the marble counter. Her eyes lifted the moment Maggie entered. No smile, no greeting, just a soft, quiet acknowledgement that something monumental had shifted between them. Maggie didn't speak right away. She poured herself coffee, avoided Jordan's gaze, then leaned back against the opposite counter and took a slow sip. "Are we going to pretend it didn't happen?" Jordan asked, her voice low. Maggie met her eyes, and for a moment, everything she felt surged dangerously close to the surface.
"No," she said.
"But I don't know how to make sense of it yet." "You don't have to," Jordan replied. "You just have to stop fighting it." Maggie exhaled, bitter and soft. "I'm not used to wanting things I'm not supposed to have." Jordan crossed the space between them slowly, deliberately. "Then let me be the first exception." Maggie didn't pull away when Jordan's fingers brushed hers. But she didn't lean in either. She just stood there, torn between everything she'd built and everything she was on the verge of destroying. "I'm scared," she admitted finally. Jordan's hand closed gently around hers.
"So am I."
"But I want this anyway." Maggie didn't answer.
Couldn't.
Because in that moment, her phone buzzed.
Sharp.
Urgent. She pulled it from her pocket and froze. No message. Just a photo. A single image. Her. And Jordan. Standing together in the library from 2 nights ago. The fire behind them. Their hands nearly touching. The angle was tight, intimate, like it had been taken from inside the house. Maggie's breath caught. "Jordan," she handed over the phone. Jordan's expression darkened instantly. "This angle, this isn't from a drone. This is close. Inside. Inside." Maggie's voice rose, panic curling in her chest. "You think someone got in?" "No," Jordan said quickly, already moving. "No one breached last night. I checked every door, every window. But this picture, this means someone was here. Or they left something here." Maggie followed her, heart slamming, her mind racing through every possibility. Jordan swept the library first, methodically, checking behind furniture, inside vents, under decorative panels. Then she moved to the hallway, scanning the molding and corners, eyes sharp. It didn't take long. Hidden near the baseboard by the archway, she found it. A pinhole camera, barely visible, wedged behind a garland. She ripped it out with a sharp twist. "They've been watching us." Maggie's stomach turned. "How long?" "I don't know. But long enough to see that we've gotten close. Long enough to want to use it against us." Maggie sat down hard on the couch, the weight of it all crashing over her. "They have proof. They can leak this. Twist it. Turn it into something it's not." "What is it, Maggie?" Jordan asked quietly. "Because I know what it is to me. But if you're going to start pretending again, don't," Maggie snapped. "Don't make this about whether I care."
"I care."
"That's the problem." Jordan stepped forward. "Then say it." "I kissed you," Maggie said, voice cracking. "And I'd do it again. 100 times. 1,000. But that doesn't mean the world will understand." To hell with the world. It's not that simple. "You're right," Jordan said, kneeling in front of her, eyes locked on hers. It's not. You're a public figure. I'm half your age. The optics are loaded. But the truth? That's still ours. And whoever is behind this isn't about love. This is about control.
Fear.
And I won't let them use that to destroy something real. Maggie felt her throat tighten. What if they release it? Then we handle it together. And what if it ruins everything I built? Then maybe what you built needs to make room for what you're becoming. Maggie stared at her, tears threatening now, lips parted but unable to speak. Jordan reached out, brushing her cheek with the back of her hand. Let them come. Let them try. But don't you dare hide from me again. Maggie closed her eyes. I don't want to hide. I just don't know how not to. Then start small, Jordan whispered. Start here. She leaned in slowly, not for a kiss, but to rest her forehead against Maggie's, grounding them both in the quiet ache between hope and fear. They stayed that way for minutes, breathing, listening, existing. And when they pulled apart, nothing had been fixed. Nothing had been solved. But something had been claimed. It had been less than 20 minutes since Jordan walked out the door. The silence she left behind was unbearable. Maggie had been pacing ever since, unable to focus, unable to sit still, unable to do anything except replay their last conversation in her mind like a warning she hadn't understood soon enough. Jordan had said she needed to chase the lead herself, that waiting for another message, another intrusion, was surrender. Maggie had begged her to take someone else with her, anyone, but Jordan had simply said, "This end with me. I need to know who's behind this before they make another move." And now the townhouse felt colder, quieter, the twinkling Christmas lights dimmer, the fire in the library nothing but embers. Maggie stared at her phone, checking it every minute, waiting for a message, a signal, anything. But nothing came. The hours dragged like wet cloth over stone, heavy and suffocating. Then the call came. Not from Jordan. From an unknown number. A male voice.
Calm. Too calm.
Ms. Whitmore? Yes, she said quickly, panic already rising. Who is this? St. Luke's Hospital. I'm calling about Jordan Hayes. She's listed you as her emergency contact. The rest of the sentence unraveled like thread in Maggie's ears. Critical condition. Arrived by ambulance. Massive blood loss. Stab wound. Head trauma. Currently in surgery. Maggie didn't remember grabbing her coat or her keys. She didn't remember how she got into the car or how the driver managed to get her to the hospital through a snow-slick city. All she remembered was the pounding in her chest, the scream inside her that refused to come out. The ER was too bright, too white, too clean. Maggie felt wrong in it, out of place in her tailored coat and red lipstick, a costume of control cracking at the edges. A nurse led her to a waiting area where she sat, hands shaking, staring at the pale blue wall as if it held answers. Jordan's name was written on a clipboard at the nurse's desk. Maggie read it over and over. Her name, the only thing tethering Maggie to the moment. Minutes passed. Then an hour. Then 2. A doctor finally approached, surgical cap, blood still on the edges of his gloves. She made it through, he said. We had to stabilize the bleeding and relieve pressure on the brain. There's a concussion.
Broken ribs.
A knife wound to the side, narrowly missing the liver. But she's alive. She's strong. Maggie's knees nearly gave out. The doctor placed a hand on her shoulder. She's unconscious, but stable. You can sit with her if you want. Maggie wanted to laugh. If she wanted. It wasn't want anymore. It was need. The hospital room was dim, quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of the monitors and the slow, shallow breaths from the bed. Jordan looked pale against the white sheets, her face bruised, lips split, a bandage wrapping her temple. One arm was in a sling. Tubes ran from her hands. Wires from her chest. Maggie sat beside her and did not speak. Her voice was somewhere she couldn't reach. So instead she reached for Jordan's hand, cold, still, but there. She curled her fingers around it, brought it to her lips, pressed a kiss to the bruised knuckles and whispered, You came back to me broken, but you came back. That's more than I deserve. The hours bled into night. Maggie didn't leave the room. She didn't answer calls. She didn't check emails. The world outside had no meaning. All she could do was stare at Jordan's still face and remember. The first moment she saw her. The way she stood in that foyer with confidence too big for her age. The way she saw through every wall Maggie had built. The firelight in the library. The whisper under the mistletoe. The quiet promise. Let me protect you. You stupid, beautiful woman, Maggie whispered, tears finally slipping down her cheeks. I told myself I didn't need this. That I didn't need you. But I was wrong. I've never needed anything more. The monitors beeped steady, unchanging. Maggie leaned closer, resting her forehead against the edge of the bed. I never told you. I thought I was too old to feel this. To want something so badly it scared me. I thought I had too much to lose. But now I realize the only thing I could lose that matters is you. A soft sound made her freeze. A breath. A shift. Maggie looked up. Jordan's eyes fluttered open. Her brow furrowed slightly, and her voice was raw, broken. Maggie. Maggie was already up, already holding her face, already brushing tears off Jordan's cheeks with shaking hands. You're okay. You're okay. Oh my God, Jordan, I'm here, Jordan murmured. Hurts like hell, but I'm here. Don't move. Don't you dare move. You're safe. You're safe now. Jordan blinked, then her hand twitched weakly, reaching for Maggie's. They tried to kill me. I know, but I saw him. Maggie stilled. Who? The one who's been watching. Following. It's not random. It's targeted. It's about you. It was never just me. Tell me everything, Maggie whispered. Jordan closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them again. He used to work with my unit. Dishonorably discharged. Blamed me. He saw me protecting you and decided that hurting you would be the way to hurt me. Maggie's blood turned cold. Why didn't you tell me before? I didn't know it was him. Not until I saw his face last night. Is he still out there? Yes, Jordan whispered. And he knows I care about you. That's why he'll try again. But this time, he won't be so patient. Maggie didn't hesitate. Then I'm done hiding. Done pretending. I'm staying with you. And when this is over, I'm not wasting another second running from what we have. Jordan gave a faint, pained smile. About time. Maggie leaned in and kissed her forehead, slow and tender. You're not alone. Not anymore. The world looked different when you knew the person you loved might have died because of you. Maggie sat in the hospital room the next morning, hair unkempt, face bare, still in the same clothes from the night before. She hadn't left Jordan's side. Not for food, not for rest, not even when the nurses insisted she take a break. There was a steel in her spine now that hadn't been there before, something sharper than fear, harder than grief. Jordan was resting again, her breathing even, but the bruises on her face told a story Maggie would never forget. Every time she looked at them, rage and guilt pulsed through her like electricity. She couldn't erase the way Jordan had looked in that hospital bed the moment she arrived, broken, pale, still bleeding. And she couldn't forget the sound of Jordan's voice when she whispered he'll try again. Maggie had lived her entire life in control. Every room she entered, every interview she gave, every word she published, precise, measured, unshakable. But now she realized that control had always been an illusion, because one man with a grudge had shattered it in a single night, and the woman who had taken a blade for her was lying unconscious in a bed that smelled like antiseptic and slow death. She stood quietly and pressed a kiss to Jordan's forehead again, lingered there, whispered, "I love you," into her skin like a secret only the two of them would ever hear. Then she walked out, her heels echoing through the corridor like a war drum. No more hiding. No more pretending. She would face this head-on. And she would end it. Back at the townhouse, Devin was waiting. He'd been managing communications, turning away reporters, handling the press blackout. But the moment he saw Maggie, something in his expression shifted. "You look different," he said carefully. "Are you okay?" No, she answered, her voice low and clear. But I will be. She walked past him and into the library, stripped off her coat, rolled up her sleeves, and sat at the desk. I need everything we have on Jordan's military history. Unit details. Disciplinary reports. Any name that ever crossed paths with her. Especially dishonorable discharges. Devin blinked. You're activating our investigative team? I'm activating me. And you're going to help. Maggie, this isn't your world. It is now. There was no room for debate in her voice. Devin nodded slowly, stepping into place beside her like a soldier falling into formation. For the next 6 hours, Maggie did what she did best. She hunted with words, with facts, with cold, clinical precision. Reports were pulled, old military files decrypted, background checks run, and then, finally, a name surfaced. Daniel M. Kerrigan, former unit liaison, dishonorably discharged for misconduct, including abuse of authority and threats against fellow soldiers. One of them being Jordan Hayes. There was no proof of direct involvement in the attack, not yet, but Maggie didn't need more proof. She had instinct, and rage, and resolve. She forwarded the file to a private contact at the NYPD, an old friend she'd once helped bury a scandal in exchange for a lifetime favor. It was time to cash in. The response came back faster than she expected. We'll keep eyes on him, the message read. But if he moves, you'll know first. Maggie closed the laptop and stared at the fire for a long moment. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the magnitude of what she was finally allowing herself to feel. She loved Jordan. Fully.
Viscerally.
Without a plan. Without an exit strategy. And if Kerrigan came near her again, he wouldn't be facing a bodyguard. He'd be facing a woman with everything to lose and nothing left to fear. That night, she returned to the hospital, stepped into Jordan's room as quietly as possible, only to find her awake, barely, but awake. Jordan turned her head, a ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. You look like hell. Maggie let out a soft laugh, tears stinging her eyes. Good. I want to match you. Have you been here long? Long enough to know I never want to be anywhere else again. Jordan's eyes softened. I'm sorry. Don't, Maggie whispered, sitting beside her, taking her hand. You almost died. And the only thing I've thought about since is how I never said what I should have. What's that? Maggie leaned in, brushed her lips gently across Jordan's knuckles. That I love you. Not in secret. Not in fear. Not behind closed doors. I love you, Jordan Hayes. And when you're better, I'm not hiding it. Jordan's breath hitched. Say it again. I love you. Even though I'm younger? Especially because you're brave enough to love someone who wasn't brave enough to love you back until now. Jordan closed her eyes, overwhelmed, and Maggie kissed her temple. Rest, she said softly. I've got things handled. Maggie, Jordan murmured. He's still out there. I know. And I'm ready for him. You don't need to be a hero. Maggie shook her head, smiling through the ache. I'm not being a hero. I'm being yours. The snow had melted just enough for the world to pretend it was safe again, but inside the mansion, the tension had become a living thing. It breathed in the walls, pulsed through the floorboards, whispered beneath the click of Maggie's heels as she walked from room to room, reinforcing every inch of her once perfectly curated sanctuary. Jordan had been released from the hospital that morning, pale, slower in movement, wrapped in gauze and silence, but alive, and that was all that mattered. Maggie had insisted on a private medical team stationed in the guest wing, refused to take any chances, and made it clear to everyone in her orbit that the house was now under lockdown. No visitors. No press. No questions. She had learned that fear could either cripple or ignite. Maggie Whitmore had chosen fire. Jordan rested now on the second floor, her body still mending, her strength not quite returned, but her presence alone was enough to keep Maggie grounded. Every time she passed the stairs, Maggie's eyes lifted, drawn upward, pulled by something stronger than gravity. Her heart ached to be with her, to lie beside her again, but she also knew she had to do more than love her. She had to fight for her. Kerrigan hadn't made another move. Not yet. But silence was its own kind of message, and Maggie had spent her life reading between the lines. She knew what was coming. The lull before the final strike. She had spent the last 24 hours preparing for it. Her security system had been upgraded with military-grade sensors. Devon had turned the basement into a control center with live camera feeds, encrypted comms, and silent alarms. And Maggie herself, Maggie, who had once laughed at the idea of holding a weapon, had learned how to use a Glock 43 in under an hour. She didn't want to be helpless again. Not ever. The fear was still there, curling at the edges of her ribcage, but it no longer controlled her. It sharpened her, fueled her, reminded her that she had something worth protecting. That night, after checking the perimeter twice, Maggie returned upstairs to find Jordan awake, sitting upright with a soft blanket over her lap, her body still stiff, but her eyes alert. Maggie crossed the room slowly, took Jordan's hand without a word, and kissed her knuckles with trembling lips. Jordan smiled faintly. "You've changed." Maggie sat beside her. "Not changed. Just remembered who I was before the fear." "And who's that?" "A woman who doesn't run from things she wants." Jordan reached up with her good hand, brushing Maggie's cheek. "You still want me?" "More than I've ever wanted anything." "Even with the danger?" "Especially because of the danger." Jordan's expression flickered, part pride, part concern. "You've taken on too much." "I haven't taken on enough," Maggie corrected gently. "You bled for me. Almost died. And the only thing I've done is hide. That ends now." She stood, walked to the window, looked out at the city blinking like a distant heartbeat. "He's coming. I can feel it." "Then let me be ready when he does." "You need to heal. And you need to stop thinking I'm made of glass." Maggie turned back. "You're not made of glass. You're made of iron. But I've spent so long letting people protect me, I forgot what it means to protect someone else." "Maggie, if I'd acted sooner, maybe you wouldn't have gotten hurt." "I'm not making that mistake again." Jordan looked at her with something deeper than admiration, something close to awe. "I've never seen you like this." "That's because no one's ever touched this part of me before." That night, she didn't sleep. She stayed in the control room with Devon, reviewing the footage from the perimeter, listening to every sound the monitors picked up. At 3:42 a.m., one of the cameras blinked. Then another. Then a third. Devon's voice was sharp. "We've got movement. Back garden. Blind spot. Northwest corner." Maggie was already moving, gun at her side, heart pounding. Devon tried to stop her. "Wait. We call the police. They won't get here in time." She took the service stairs down to the ground floor, heart thudding like thunder, pulse thick in her ears. She moved through the house with the silence Jordan had taught her. Every step deliberate, every breath controlled. She saw the shadow first.
Tall. Broad.
Moving near the hedge wall. The power flickered. Not enough to shut anything down. Just enough to signal he's here. Maggie stepped outside. The cold hit her like a slap, but she didn't flinch. She raised the gun with both hands and called out, voice steady. "You have exactly 3 seconds to show your face." The figure froze, then moved forward into the moonlight. Daniel Kerrigan, older than she expected. Hardened, scar running down the left side of his face. But his eyes were feral, calculating. "So you're the reason she got soft," he said, smiling. "She didn't get soft," Maggie replied. "She got smart. And she chose someone who sees her for who she is." "And what are you? Her boss? Her trophy?" "No," Maggie said, voice like steel. "I'm the woman who loves her. And the one who'll put a bullet in you if you take another step." He laughed, stepping closer. "You don't have it in you. Try me." But before he could take that step, another voice rang out. "Drop it, Jordan." She stood at the edge of the doorway, gun aimed, eyes blazing. Her body was trembling but upright, fierce, unbroken. "Step away from her. Now." Kerrigan turned, just slightly, calculating again. And Maggie didn't wait. She pulled the trigger. The bullet struck his shoulder. He dropped the knife he hadn't yet raised, stumbled backward, and Jordan closed the distance, disarming and pinning him to the ground with a grunt of pain and fury. The police arrived 3 minutes later, but it was already over. The sirens had faded, the police were gone, Kerrigan was in custody, and the house, once a battleground, was finally still. But the silence that settled wasn't the same kind of silence that had filled Maggie's home for years. This wasn't the silence of loneliness, of avoidance, of walls too thick and rooms too empty. This silence was earned.
Alive.
Heavy with what had just happened. Maggie hadn't let go of the gun until the ambulance had taken Kerrigan away, until she saw Jordan safe, upright, bleeding from her side again, but refusing to go back to the hospital. She had stood there in the hallway, breathing hard, her hands trembling from adrenaline, and Jordan had reached for her like she was the only anchor left in a world that had spun too fast for too long. "You saved me," Jordan had whispered. Maggie had shaken her head. "You saved me first." Hours passed. The sky began to lighten. The first soft blue of morning touched the frost-covered windows. Maggie sat in the edge of her bed, hair disheveled, sweater torn at the shoulder from the scuffle, while Jordan stood at the bathroom mirror, pressing gauze to her reopened wound, her expression unreadable. Maggie watched her from the doorway, the woman who had changed everything without even trying. Jordan caught her gaze in the mirror. "You're staring." "I'm allowed to stare," Maggie said softly. "You nearly died." Again. Jordan turned, her eyes darker than usual in the dim light. "But I didn't. Because of you." "Don't give me credit. You pulled the trigger, Maggie. And I haven't stopped shaking since. That doesn't make you weak." Maggie stepped forward slowly, barefoot on the cold floor, stopping just inches away. "You said once that I don't let people see what's underneath. That I build walls. You do. Not with you. Not anymore." Jordan's breath caught as Maggie raised a hand and touched her cheek, thumb grazing gently over the bruise beneath her eye. "I was so afraid of wanting you," she whispered. "So afraid of what it meant. The age gap. The rules. The way people would look at us. But now I see it. All of it. You didn't walk into my life to protect me. You walked into it to wake me up. You're not afraid anymore?" Maggie smiled faintly, pain and truth laced in her voice. "I'm still terrified. But I'm not running. I don't want to be alone tonight. Not after everything. Not anymore." Jordan hesitated, her eyes searching Maggie's, not for lust, but for permission. "For certainty." "What are you asking me?" Maggie reached for her hand and placed it gently over her own heart. "I want you to come to bed with me. Not because I need protecting. Not because I'm scared. But because I want to be with you. All of you." The moment hung, thick with years of repression unraveling at once. Jordan leaned in slowly, kissed her with a kind of reverence that made Maggie's knees tremble. It was not the first kiss they had shared, but it was the first kiss without fear, without hesitation, without a clock ticking behind them. It deepened, hands tangling in hair, in fabric, in need too long ignored. They moved toward the bed, shedding clothes like they shed doubts, like they shed the weight of everything unsaid. Jordan laid her down gently, eyes never leaving hers, as if Maggie might vanish if she blinked. Maggie arched into her touch, fingertips burning across skin, breathless and undone, whispering her name like a vow. The world narrowed to their bodies, to the warmth they created in that room that had once been so cold. When Jordan kissed the scar on Maggie's side from an old surgery, Maggie felt tears prick her eyes, not from pain, but from the staggering tenderness of being seen, of being cherished. "You're beautiful," Jordan said between kisses. "All of you. Every line, every inch. I want all of it." Maggie let herself cry then. Soft, broken sounds into the pillow as she clung to Jordan and let herself be held, let herself be known, let herself be loved. They didn't rush. They took their time. They mapped each other with mouths and hands, with breath and confession. And when it was over, when their bodies lay tangled in the hush of early morning, Maggie traced lazy circles on Jordan's back and whispered, "I don't care who knows anymore. Let the world talk. Jordan pressed her face into her neck, her smile brushing warm against her skin. It already was. Let's give them something worth talking about. Maggie laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. The kind of laugh that tasted like freedom, like joy, like home. The morning after their bodies had learned the truth their hearts had whispered for weeks, the house felt different. Not safer, not quieter, just honest.
Real.
Maggie awoke with Jordan's arm wrapped around her waist, their legs tangled beneath the heavy duvet, her breath warm against the back of Maggie's neck. And for the first time in years, Maggie didn't wake with dread in her chest or a to-do list already unfurling behind her eyes. She woke with peace and the terrifying, thrilling weight of something real. When she turned to face Jordan, the younger woman was already watching her with that gaze that made Maggie feel like a person, not a brand, not an empire, just a woman.
Seen.
Desired.
Loved.
You didn't run, Jordan said, voice thick with sleep. No, Maggie replied, reaching up to tuck a strand of hair behind Jordan's ear. And I'm not going to. They stayed in bed longer than they should have. Let time blur. Let hands wander. Let kisses stretch into soft sighs and whispered jokes and quiet declarations only the sheets would ever hear. But eventually the world called them back. Devin sent a message about the final press statement regarding the Kerrigan arrest, and Maggie knew the time had come to face what she'd been avoiding since the beginning. Not the fear, not the danger, the judgment, the looks, the whispers. There's a New Year's charity gala tomorrow night, she said softly, as Jordan finished buttoning a crisp white shirt. I'm scheduled to speak. Jordan glanced over, sliding a watch onto her wrist. You want to cancel? No, Maggie replied. I want you to come with me. Jordan froze, then turned. With you? Not as security. As whatever this is. As mine. The silence that followed was electric. Maggie, that means photos. Articles. Everything we've been trying to avoid. I'm not trying to avoid it anymore, Maggie said, voice steady. Let them look. Let them speculate. I don't want to hide. I don't want to keep you in the shadows like a secret I'm ashamed of. I want to stand next to you, and not flinch. Jordan's expression softened into something reverent. Then I'll be there. Maggie nodded once, lips tight with the pressure of the moment. Wear the black suit. The one that makes me lose my train of thought. That's all of them, Jordan said, smirking. Exactly. The night of the gala was colder than expected. Wind licked at bare arms and carried the sounds of the city in sharp, glittering echoes. Maggie stood near the entrance of the venue, resplendent in a midnight blue gown that hugged her body like it had been sewn for her in a dream. Her hair was swept up, neck exposed, and her eyes lined in something that wasn't armor, but fire. She looked powerful,
Stunning.
unapologetically herself. When Jordan stepped out of the car, dressed in tailored black with a single silver pin at her lapel, Maggie felt her throat tighten. It wasn't just how beautiful she was, it was how she looked at Maggie. Like nothing else mattered. Like the world could end, and she'd still be standing there, holding space for her. Cameras flashed. Reporters called her name. And when Jordan reached for her hand, gently, slowly, asking without words, Maggie didn't hesitate. She took it. Their fingers interlocked. Flashbulbs popped like fireworks. A few gasps. A few murmurs. And then the world kept turning. Inside the venue, heads turned. Some people smiled.
Some frowned.
A few whispered behind napkins and clutched their pearls like a scandal had walked through the door. Maggie felt every single glance. But Jordan's hand never left hers. When she stood at the podium, Maggie took a breath and looked down at the card she had written. Then she looked past them, into the crowd, and finally, into Jordan's eyes. For most of my life, I believed that power meant never needing anyone, she began. I built a company.
A name.
I earned my place in rooms full of men who didn't want me there. And I wore my solitude like a medal. But recently, I learned that real strength isn't about standing alone. It's about choosing who you'll stand beside. A ripple moved through the audience. She smiled. So this year, I'm starting over. Not in business. In love. In courage. In honesty. I'm choosing not to hide. Jordan's gaze burned into her from across the room.
Pride.
Love. And something else. Relief. The applause was polite at first. Then sincere. Then sustained. Maggie stepped down from the podium and walked straight to Jordan, who stood there looking stunned and speechless for the first time Maggie had ever seen. What was that? Jordan asked. Maggie laced their fingers again. That was me saying I love you. In front of everyone. You're insane. Maybe. But I'm yours. The days after the gala were a blur of headlines and whispers, but Maggie didn't flinch. She read every article with a calm, unshakable gaze, from the subtle commentary on her boldness to the not-so-subtle remarks on the age gap between her and Jordan. Media mogul Whitmore shocks industry with romance reveal, one read, while another screamed scandal or statement. 45-year-old CEO steps out with 24-year-old former bodyguard. None of it surprised her. What did surprise her, though, was how little it affected her. Because every morning she woke up with Jordan's hand wrapped around her waist, every time she found coffee already waiting for her on the kitchen counter with a note that said drink this or perish, and every glance they exchanged across the room that said I see you, I choose you, I'm not going anywhere. That was the only story she cared about. But not everyone in her world agreed. The board called an emergency meeting. Sponsors expressed concern. A few long-standing donors to her literacy foundation began to withdraw quietly. Maggie stood in her office, glass of water in one hand, her phone in the other, reading a message from the Department of Private Protection, an official notice that Jordan's continued presence as her security detail was a conflict of interest. They offered to reassign her to a different client, effective immediately. Maggie didn't respond. She walked to the window, heart suddenly hammering, breath shallow. This wasn't about scandal anymore. It was about power, about being punished for daring to love someone people thought she shouldn't. Behind her, Jordan entered the room, holding a folder she clearly hadn't yet seen the contents of. You okay? Maggie turned slowly. They're trying to pull you from my detail. Jordan blinked. What? The agency. They say it's a conflict now that we're involved. Jordan stared at her, then tossed the folder on the table. Let them. I'll resign. I'm not leaving you. Maggie stepped forward, voice hard. You shouldn't have to give up your career for me. It's not just a career anymore. It's a job I took to protect someone I didn't know I'd fall in love with. And I did. So, if they want to call that unprofessional, fine. I call it real. Maggie's throat tightened. You're serious?
Deadly.
Maggie turned away, running a hand through her hair, suddenly overwhelmed by the pressure pushing in from all sides. This was supposed to be the hard part. Coming out. Admitting it. I didn't think the aftermath would feel worse. You're not alone in it, Jordan said quietly. They can take my badge, my uniform, my rank, but they don't get to take me from you. Maggie crossed the room, her pulse racing. But what about what you want? I want you. Not the job. Not the title. Just you. And if I asked you to stay with me, here, not as protection but as my partner? You wouldn't even have to ask. Maggie reached for her hand, holding it tightly, eyes fierce. Then we do this on our terms, not theirs. You walk away from them, and I make sure you never need them again. You're not responsible for my future. Maybe not, but I want to build one with you anyway. That night, Maggie drafted the statement herself. No PR team. No ghostwriter. Just her voice, clear and unwavering. She posted it to her official page. I built my career telling stories that matter. This is the story that matters most to me now. I'm in love with someone brave, brilliant, and strong. She also happens to be 21 years younger than me. I'm not embarrassed. I'm not ashamed. I'm proud. We're not asking for permission, just space to live freely. Within minutes, the post exploded. Support poured in. Celebrities, former staff, readers, women from around the world writing thank you for not hiding. Of course, there were critics, but their voices were drowned out by something louder, love. Maggie turned off her phone and walked to the garden, where Jordan stood near the frosted trees, bundled in one of Maggie's coats, watching the stars appear. Maggie wrapped her arms around her from behind, resting her chin on Jordan's shoulder. "Still sure you want this?" Jordan leaned back into her. "Never been more sure of anything. They'll keep trying to pull us apart, then let them try. And if they succeed?" Jordan turned, cupped Maggie's face with both hands, and kissed her like she was anchoring her to the earth. "They won't." The new year arrived without permission, slipping through the cracks of a quiet evening like a whispered promise. There were no crowds, no champagne towers, no camera flashes or gloved hands pretending not to judge. Just soft music playing from the vintage record player in Maggie's living room, a fire burning low, and the sound of Jordan's laughter echoing through the halls of the house that had once felt like a fortress but now, finally, felt like a home. Maggie stood in the kitchen barefoot, holding a wine glass with one hand and watching the way Jordan moved, loose, relaxed, barefoot as well, in one of Maggie's old Oxford shirts that fit her too loosely in the shoulders and perfectly everywhere else. Every time Maggie looked at her, something ached. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming relief of having her still here, still alive, still hers. There had been no more threats. No strange packages. No midnight visitors or drone sightings. Kerrigan had disappeared into the system and neither Dellis had heard his name since. The world had calmed around them. And yet, inside Maggie, everything had shifted. Love had never felt like this before, this solid, this sacred. Jordan turned, holding a small plate with slices of brie and crackers, and raised an eyebrow. "You're staring again." "I warned you I would," Maggie said, walking over to take the plate. "Especially when you wear that shirt. So, I should never give it back." "You were never going to." Jordan leaned in, brushed a slow kiss against Maggie's jaw, then pulled back just enough to whisper, "Do you regret it?" "Which part?" "All of it. The risk. The fallout. Choosing me." Maggie set the plate down and took both of Jordan's hands in hers. "Every choice that got me to you is the only thing I don't regret. The only thing I'm proud of without hesitation." Jordan's gaze dropped for a second, humbled, and Maggie tilted her chin up gently. "You're not a scandal, Jordan. You're a miracle I almost missed because I was too busy playing by rules that never served me." Jordan held her breath, then smiled. "You always say things like that." "Like what?" "Like you're writing your vows without even knowing it." The room stilled. Maggie blinked. "Is that what you want?" Jordan stepped back, just slightly, just enough to create space between them. She reached into her back pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Maggie froze. "Jordan, you almost died," Jordan said softly.
Twice.
"And I did nothing but stand beside you, watch over you, fall in love with every version of you. But it wasn't until you pulled that trigger that I realized something. You never needed me to protect you. You just needed someone who wouldn't flinch when you became everything you were always afraid to be." Maggie's throat closed. Jordan opened the box. Inside was a simple ring, white gold, no stones, just a smooth, elegant band. Timeless. "This isn't about rings or titles or grand gestures," Jordan continued. "It's about choosing you every day, without shame, without hiding. I want a life with you, one where I'm not guarding you from the world, but building something inside it. Will you let me do that?" Maggie stared at the ring, tears already hot in her eyes. "You're supposed to wait for me to ask." "You've never waited for anyone," Jordan said, grinning. "Why should I?" Maggie laughed, watery and breathless. "Yes," she said. "God, yes." Jordan slid the ring onto her finger, and the moment it settled there, something in Maggie clicked into place. Not ownership, not possession, but peace. Later, just before midnight, they stepped out onto the balcony, wrapped in thick blankets, a thermos of mulled wine between them. The city sparkled below, millions of lives counting down together, waiting for the clean slate of a new year. Maggie rested her head on Jordan's shoulder, her fingers now playing with the edge of the ring like a secret only they knew. "I used to think love was for other people," she said softly. "That by the time I reached this point in my life, it would be too late. that I was too much or not enough, that the world wouldn't take me seriously if I dared to want more than just success. You get to have both, Jordan whispered. Success. And someone who loves you through it. And someone who laughs when I spill red wine on silk rugs. Especially then. Maggie turned to look at her, this woman, her woman, who had appeared in her life like a storm and stayed like a sunrise. Thank you for not giving up on me. Thank you for finally letting me in. The clock struck midnight. Fireworks erupted in the distance. And as the sky filled with color and sound, Maggie kissed Jordan like it was the first time, like it would never be the last, like she had waited her whole life to love this freely. She had built an empire, yes. But that night, in the quiet aftermath of everything they'd survived, Maggie realized something even greater. She hadn't just built a life. She had finally begun one. Thank you so much for being here and for believing in this channel. If you feel in your heart, you can donate with super thanks so I can focus more and more on this project. Your support helps me keep creating these love stories and bringing them to life for you. See you in the next video.